Most people spend their entire lives chasing money, like shadows running after the light. But a few, just a rare few, don't chase it at all. They attract it. They walk into a room, and opportunities seem to follow them. They speak, and doors open. They don't beg life to give them something. Life bends to their belief. The difference isn't luck, it's mindset. And this is the story of how one man discovered that truth, the hard way. Ethan Cole was an ordinary man living in a small town outside of Denver. He worked long hours at a warehouse, lifting boxes heavier than his dreams. Every day felt the same: alarm clock, coffee, work, bills, sleep. He often told his friends, "If I could just make more money, everything would change." But money never came easily to Ethan. Every raise disappeared into debt. Every bonus fixed another broken thing. One night, after another 12-hour shift, he sat alone in his kitchen staring at his last $37. He felt angry, at the system, at luck, at life. "Why is it always so hard?" he whispered. That's when he remembered something his grandfather used to say. "Son, wealth doesn't start in your pocket. It starts in your head." At the time, Ethan had laughed. But now, staring at the empty table, those words hit him differently. He decided to test them. The turning point: the next morning, Ethan walked into the local library, a place he hadn't been since high school. He asked the librarian for books about success, wealth, and mindset. She smiled and handed him an old, worn-out copy of Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. That night, under a dim kitchen light, he began to read. The words felt like they were written just for him. "Whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve." He read that line over and over again. Could it really be that simple? For years, Ethan had been waiting for life to change, blaming luck, the economy, his past. But now he began to wonder if the real problem wasn't outside, but inside. That night, he wrote in a notebook, "Wealth begins in the mind." He underlined it twice. The experiment: over the next few weeks, Ethan began a quiet experiment. He decided that before he changed his life, he would first change his thoughts. Every morning, before work, he looked in the mirror and said, "I am capable. I am worthy. I am ready." At first, it felt strange, even silly. But something inside him began to shift. He noticed that when he thought positive, his energy changed. His coworkers responded differently. His boss started trusting him with small responsibilities he never had before. It wasn't magic. It was mindset. Ethan realized that for years he had been walking through life with invisible chains, thoughts like, "I'll never make it. I wasn't born lucky. Success is for other people." He saw now that those beliefs were not facts. They were choices. So he chose new ones. The lesson Napoleon Hill once wrote: "There are no limitations to the mind except those we acknowledge." Ethan began to understand that his old life was a reflection of his old thoughts. His outer world had been mirroring his inner one. He used to think, "I'm poor because I don't have opportunities." Now he began to think, "Opportunities appear because I'm preparing for them." That single change opened his eyes. Instead of complaining about problems at work, he started solving them. Instead of seeing himself as a victim of circumstance, he started acting like a creator of opportunity. His boss noticed. In 2 months, Ethan was promoted to shift supervisor, the first real raise he'd ever had. But something even more important happened. He felt different. He felt powerful, not because of money, but because he understood that he was in control of his thoughts, and therefore, his future. The power of belief. One evening, after his shift, Ethan sat on his porch and wrote in his notebook again, "My thoughts are the blueprint of my destiny." He started seeing patterns everywhere. When he spoke of lack, lack grew. When he spoke of abundance, abundance found him. He remembered reading that the mind is like fertile soil. Whatever seeds you plant, it will grow. If you plant fear, you'll harvest failure. If you plant faith, you'll harvest fortune. So Ethan decided to plant differently. He stopped saying, "I can't." He stopped saying, "Someday." He started saying, "Now." And life started responding in kind. The shift from fear to flow. Before, he used to chase opportunities in desperation. Now, he attracted them. A local business owner noticed Ethan's reliability and offered him a chance to manage inventory for his store, part-time, but with great potential. Ethan didn't hesitate. He said yes. This was the first time in his life that he felt success coming toward him instead of running away. He realized that wealth doesn't come to those who wish for it, it comes to those who believe they deserve it. And belief, he learned, is built one thought at a time. The moral of Part 1, the foundation of wealth. Ethan's story isn't about luck or talent. It's about awakening. He discovered that every fortune begins as a thought, an invisible idea shaped by belief. When your inner world is rich, your outer world cannot stay poor. When your thoughts expand, your life expands with them. The foundation of wealth isn't money. It's mindset. And the moment Ethan realized that, his real journey began. Because once a man learns to control his thoughts, he stops chasing success, and success starts chasing him. To be continued. Backhand index pointing right in Part 2. You become what you think you deserve. Ethan discovers that belief alone isn't enough, it must be rooted in worthiness. Would you like me to continue with Part 2, 1,000 words, in the same storytelling tone and Napoleon Hill style? Gemstone: The Invisible Fortune, Part 2, The Bridge Between Thought and Reality. Hook: most people dream of success. A few plan for it, but only a handful ever build it, brick by brick, with quiet, unshakable discipline. They are the ones who act when everyone else hesitates, who work when no one is watching, who move forward when doubt whispers, "Stop." This is where Ethan Cole's real journey began, not with money, not with luck, but with the one force that turns dreams into reality: discipline. 1. The lesson of the cold morning. It was 5 a.m. on a freezing Colorado morning. The alarm buzzed beside Ethan's bed, cutting through the silence like a blade. His first thought was the same as always: 5 more minutes. But this time, something inside him shifted. He remembered the promise he made to himself: to rise when his body said rest, to keep his word, no matter how small. He sat up, shivering, and whispered to himself, "Discipline begins here." That single decision changed the direction of his day, and soon, his life. Ethan didn't have fancy plans or investors. What he had was a growing belief and a notebook full of goals. He decided that every morning, before work, he'd spend 1 hour studying success, reading, writing, thinking, and planning. For weeks, no one noticed. There were no fireworks, no breakthroughs. But something was happening inside him. His thoughts were sharpening. His confidence was growing. He began to realize that the man who masters himself, masters everything. 2. The bridge between thought and action. Napoleon Hill once said, "Discipline is the bridge between thought and reality." Ethan started seeing how true that was. At first, he loved the new morning routine. But as the days passed, his excitement faded. There were mornings he didn't want to wake up, nights when his doubts returned, whispering, "What's the point? Nothing's changing." But he pushed through, not with motivation, but with decision. That was the moment he learned: motivation starts you. Discipline keeps you. He discovered that discipline isn't about punishment, it's about self-respect. Every time he kept his promise, he felt stronger inside. He was teaching his mind that his word meant something, and once his mind trusted him, everything else became easier. 3. From resistance to rhythm. Ethan's new habits began to spread. He started applying discipline at work, organizing the warehouse, tracking details no one cared about, showing up early, staying calm under pressure. His coworkers laughed. "Man, you're doing too much for this paycheck." But Ethan wasn't working for the paycheck anymore. He was working for his future self. Within months, the chaos that once filled his days began to fade. Life started moving in rhythm, like gears finally catching. What used to feel hard became natural. He wasn't fighting with his old habits anymore. He was becoming the kind of man who didn't quit, and that realization, that he could trust himself, gave him peace he'd never known. 4. The power of focus. One evening, Ethan sat in a diner with a notepad. Around him, people were scrolling on their phones, gossiping, talking about everything and nothing. He looked up from his notes and thought, "Most people scatter their energy." He remembered a line he'd read: "Where attention goes, growth follows." It struck him hard. He realized how much of his life he had spent reacting, jumping from one idea to another, starting and quitting, chasing every distraction that promised quick success. So he decided to focus. Point: one goal, one direction. He wanted to start his own business, something small but his own, using everything he'd learned from years in warehouses. He began researching inventory systems and logistics. Every spare hour went into learning. No more Netflix, no more scrolling, no more excuses. At first, it was lonely. But soon, focus became his peace. His mind, once full of noise, grew still, sharp, calm, powerful. He began to see that clarity is wealth. 5. The energy of gratitude. Not long after, life tested him. His car broke down. A bill arrived he couldn't pay. A project he'd been working on fell apart. The old Ethan would have cursed, complained, and given up. But this Ethan, the one who had been training his mind, paused. He whispered, "There's something to learn here." Instead of anger, he chose gratitude. He listed what he still had: his health, his job, his ideas, his will. That night, he wrote in his notebook, "Gratitude turns pain into power." He realized something profound: that gratitude isn't about ignoring struggle. It's about finding strength inside it. When you thank life for the lesson, life gives you more lessons worth learning. Soon, he noticed something subtle. The more grateful he became, the better everything flowed. People smiled back more. Opportunities seemed to appear. It was as if life was saying, "Finally, you're ready to receive." 6. The company you keep. A few months later, Ethan's success began to show. His boss asked him to train new employees. A local entrepreneur invited him to join a small business group. That's when he learned the final lesson: you become like the people you spend time with. He realized that his old friends, though kind, still lived in the same cycle of complaints and excuses. They meant well, but their words drained his spirit. So Ethan started spending time with dreamers, builders, and doers, people who talked about ideas, not problems. Their energy lifted him. Their faith fueled his own. He didn't cut anyone off. He simply rose higher, and those meant to rise with him did. 7. The quiet transformation. 6 months later, Ethan looked around his life. The money wasn't huge yet, but the man in the mirror was unrecognizable. He stood taller, spoke clearer, moved with calm certainty. He understood what Napoleon Hill meant when he said, "Before you can lead others, you must first lead yourself." Ethan had become the kind of man success could trust. Moral of Part 2, The Bridge to Reality. Discipline, focus, gratitude, environment. These are not just words, they are the invisible architecture of success. Ethan learned that when your mind commands and your body obeys, you become unstoppable. When your focus is sharp and your heart grateful, you attract abundance. And when you surround yourself with the right energy, you rise. Because the outer world always bends to the inner one. And once your mind accepts that truth, the rest of your life follows. To be continued. Backhand index pointer right in Part 3. The power of purpose. Ethan learns that true wealth isn't about money at all. It's about mission, service, and legacy. Would you like me to send Part 3, 1,000 words, next in the same powerful Napoleon Hill story style? Gemstone: The Invisible Fortune, Part 3. The Power of Purpose. Hook: every great success begins as a whisper in the heart, a quiet calling that says, "You were made for more." Most people ignore it. They drown it with noise, fear, and routine. But a few, the rare few, stop and listen. And once they do, their entire life begins to change. Ethan Cole was about to discover that the true secret of wealth isn't just work, or knowledge, or even discipline. It's purpose, the fire that gives meaning to every step forward. Part 1. The calling within. It started on a rainy Thursday evening. Ethan sat alone in his small apartment, staring at the ceiling. The hum of the fridge was the only sound. He had been disciplined, focused, and grateful. His habits were strong. But something felt missing, like a song without rhythm. He whispered to himself, "I'm working hard, but for what?" That question hit him like thunder. He realized he'd been building his mind and improving his habits, but not his direction. He had become a better worker, a stronger man, but he hadn't yet chosen why he was doing it all. That night, he opened his notebook and wrote a single line across the top of a blank page. "What am I truly meant to build?" Hours passed. Memories surfaced: his father fixing engines, his mother helping neighbors without asking anything in return. He remembered how proud they looked when he helped someone, even in small ways. Then it clicked. Ethan didn't just want to earn money, he wanted to create value, to make life smoother for others who worked hard and got overlooked. That was his calling, his why. And in that moment, his tired heart caught fire again. Part 2. The Power of a Clear Purpose. When Ethan found his purpose, his energy changed overnight. He still woke up early, still studied, still worked, But now, every action had meaning. Before, he had to push himself every day. Now, his purpose pulled him forward. He remembered Napoleon Hill's words. When you know what you want and why you want it, the world steps aside to let you pass. Ethan's coworkers began to notice the difference. He wasn't just working harder. He was working with fire. He spoke differently, moved differently, thought differently. When someone complained, he listened with calm strength. When problems showed up, he looked for solutions. He wasn't waiting for luck anymore. He was creating direction. His purpose gave his work meaning. And that meaning gave him unstoppable energy. Part 3. The Circle of Strength. Ethan soon met others who shared his drive, people who were hungry for growth, who dreamed of building something great. They began meeting every Saturday morning in a local cafe. 5 dreamers with notebooks and coffee cups, sharing ideas, failures, and plans. At first, it was just talk. But over time, something powerful formed between them, unity built on purpose. They started pushing each other to rise higher. They learned together, failed together, and celebrated every small win together. Ethan realized something profound. Alone, we survive. Together, we thrive. Each person's belief fed the others. When one lost motivation, the rest lifted him. Soon, their energy became one, strong, steady, impossible to stop. He understood that his future grew from the energy he surrounded himself with. So he protected that energy like treasure. He began choosing carefully who got his time, not by status, but by spirit. Choose people who feed your mind, not your fears. He wrote in his notebook. You don't need many, just a few strong ones who believe in something greater. And as he built his circle, his confidence multiplied. Success stopped being a struggle. It became a flow, like a river moving naturally toward the sea. Together, they were rising, clearer, stronger, unstoppable. Part 4. The Wall of Resistance. But no path worth walking stays smooth for long. Ethan's plans hit trouble. A key client backed out. A shipment delay cost him weeks. His savings began to thin. Doubt returned, whispering, maybe it's not meant to be. The nights grew heavy. The mornings colder. He found himself staring at his reflection one dawn, exhausted, ready to quit. But then he remembered his purpose. And more than that, the faces of his small team, his friends, his dreamers. He couldn't quit, not just for himself, but for them. He realized that persistence wasn't about strength, it was about heart. The will to keep going when everything screams, stop. Persistence, he thought, is the quiet fire that keeps you walking when no one claps, when no one believes, when no one sees. That morning, he made himself a promise. I will not stop moving forward, no matter how slow the climb. Part 5. The Secret of the Fighter. Ethan began to see a pattern. Success always asks the same question. How bad do you want it? Those who quit fail because they mistake struggle for a sign to stop. But the strong, they see struggle as proof they're close. He remembered a quote he'd written once. The quitter sees the end. The fighter sees the beginning. Each setback became a teacher. Each delay became a test. Each failure became a lesson written in sweat. He stopped fearing defeat. He started studying it. He realized that persistence isn't born. It's built. Built every time you keep going when you're tired. When you fail and still rise. When you walk one more step after everyone else stops. And in that relentless rhythm, Ethan found peace. Because persistence didn't just change his results, it changed him. Part 6. The Rise of Unstoppable. Purpose. Months later, Ethan stood in front of his small warehouse office. His company's name painted proudly above the door. It wasn't huge yet, but it was real. He had built it from nothing, with purpose, persistence, and a small team who believed as he did. As the sun rose, his friend and business partner asked, Ethan, how did we even get here? Ethan smiled and said, we never stopped moving forward. He looked back on every cold morning, every failure, every sleepless night, and realized they were all part of the same plan. Each struggle had prepared him. Each delay had strengthened him. Each fall had taught him how to rise higher. He finally understood the truth Napoleon Hill wrote long ago. Victory is always possible for the person who refuses to stop fighting. Ethan's story wasn't about luck or talent. It was about purpose, persistence, and faith. And now, as he watched his small team open the doors for another day, he knew this was only the beginning. Because once you walk in purpose, you don't chase success, you become it. To be continued. Backhand index pointing right in Part 4. The Law of Faith. Ethan learns how unseen belief shapes visible success, and how to turn thought into reality. Would you like me to continue with part 4, 1000 words, in the same Napoleon Hill style? Next. Gemstone the Invisible Fortune, Part 4, The Law of Faith. Hook. Everything you can touch once began as something you couldn't. Every building, every invention, every fortune, it all started as an invisible picture in someone's mind. That invisible power is faith, the bridge between what you imagine and what you live. Without it, your dreams stay locked in your thoughts. With it, they take form in your hands. Ethan Cole was about to learn this truth, not from a book, but from life itself. Part 1. When everything fell apart, the year had started strong for Ethan. His small company was growing, his team was motivated, and his plans were finally unfolding. Then, as life often does, everything changed. A major investor backed out without warning. 2 key employees left for better offers, and one morning, he woke up to find a notice on his desk. Payment overdue. Final warning. He sat there in silence. The walls felt smaller, the air heavier. For the first time in months, fear crept back into his heart. He whispered, "What if this was all just luck?" Doubt, that quiet thief, began to steal his confidence. That night, he called his old mentor, Mr. Harlow, a man who had once guided him when he first started dreaming. When Ethan explained his situation, Mr. Harlow chuckled softly and said, "Good. Now you're finally ready to build something real." Ethan frowned. "Good? Sir, I'm losing everything." Mr. Harlow's voice was calm. "Ethan, faith is not tested when things go right. It's tested when nothing does." Then he added, "The moment you stop believing, your dream begins to die. Keep the vision alive, even when it feels impossible. That's faith." Those words sank deep. That night, Ethan decided, no matter what, he would not lose faith in the vision he saw when this journey began. Part 2, Seeing Beyond Sight. For weeks, Ethan worked harder than ever. But this time, he added something new to his morning routine, a practice Mr. Harlow had taught him. Each dawn, before touching his phone or opening his laptop, he sat quietly for 5 minutes and imagined his goal as already complete. He pictured the office full of light, his team growing, clients smiling, success flowing easily. He felt it, really felt it, until it seemed real. At first, it felt silly. But soon, something inside him began to shift. He noticed his anxiety fading. His decisions became sharper. His tone grew more confident. Even his team noticed. One said, "You look calmer, boss. Like you know something we don't." Ethan smiled. "I do. I know it's all going to work out, even if I can't see how yet." That was faith, believing in the unseen. As Napoleon Hill once wrote, "Faith is the head chemist of the mind. When mixed with thought, it becomes the catalyst of creation." Ethan didn't just hope things would improve, he believed they already were. And the more he believed, the more small miracles began to appear. A new client found his business online and signed a big contract. A supplier offered him better terms. An investor who had once said no suddenly called back. Coincidence? No, alignment. The world was responding to his renewed faith. Part 3, The Invisible Law. One evening, Ethan sat with his journal and wrote, "When I think in fear, doors close. When I think in faith, they open." He began to understand that faith wasn't about religion or luck. It was a law, as real as gravity. You attract what you believe you deserve. You move toward what you see most clearly in your mind. He realized that his past failures weren't proof of weakness. They were lessons that built his faith muscle. Every struggle had forced him to trust the unseen more deeply. That trust created calmness. And that calmness attracted the right people and opportunities. Faith, he realized, was the quiet builder of all success. The richest people, he thought, aren't just the hardest workers, they're the strongest believers. He stopped doubting his timing and started trusting his growth. He stopped chasing approval and started walking in certainty. Faith became his compass, guiding him when logic couldn't. Part 4. When the storm returned. Just when things began to rise again, life tested Ethan once more. His biggest shipment was delayed. A client backed out last minute. The tension in his office grew. Whispers, worries, stress. His team looked to him for answers. Inside, Ethan was tired. But he remembered Mr. Harlow's words. When faith is tested, it's being strengthened. So, instead of reacting in panic, he gathered his team and said, I know this storm looks bad, but it's temporary. We've faced worse before. Let's focus on what we can control, our effort, our attitude, our unity. His tone was steady. His eyes sure, and that confidence spread like fire. Within a week, the shipment arrived. Within 2, the lost client referred him to another, even bigger one. It was as if the storm had never existed. That day, Ethan wrote on his whiteboard in bold letters. Faith doesn't ignore the storm. It simply believes the sun will shine again. Part 5. The vision within. Months later, business stabilized. But something even greater had changed. Ethan himself. He no longer woke up with anxiety. He no longer chased results in desperation. He had learned to trust the process, not because he was sure of success, but because he was sure of himself. One evening, standing by his window, watching the sunset paint the city gold, he whispered, I finally get it. Faith isn't waiting for proof. It's walking like it's already done. That night, he wrote in his journal, the man I was, the fearful, doubtful man, could never have built this. The man I've become, certain, calm, faithful, is the one who can. It wasn't just business that was growing, it was him. Part 6. The unseen fortune. Weeks later, Mr. Harlow visited Ethan's new office. He smiled as he looked around. You've built something special, son, Ethan replied. I almost lost it all. But you were right. The moment I believed again, everything shifted. Mr. Harlow nodded. That's the law of faith. The world mirrors your belief, not your wishes, not your words, but what you truly believe deep down. He placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder and said softly, keep that faith strong. It's worth more than gold, because it creates it. Ethan smiled, understanding now what he never had before. Faith wasn't a feeling. It was a force. It was the invisible fortune within him, one that could never be taken away. And as he watched his team working, the hum of success filling the room, he whispered to himself, what I believe, I create. What I doubt, I destroy. So I'll believe, always. That's when he knew the richest wealth he'd ever owned wasn't in his bank. It was in his mind. To be continued. Backhand index pointing right in Part 5. The power of imagination. Ethan learns how to turn belief into action, and how to design his future before it happens. Would you like me to continue with Part 5, 1000 words, next in the same Napoleon Hill story style? Gemstone. The Invisible Fortune, Part 5. The power of imagination. Hook. Every great empire, invention, and fortune began the same way, as a picture in someone's mind. The airplane, the light bulb, the internet, all were imagined before they became real. Napoleon Hill said, imagination is the workshop of the mind, where desires are shaped into plans. Ethan Cole was about to learn that truth firsthand, that the life you see in your mind is the one you will one day hold in your hands. Part 1. The Spark of Vision. It was a quiet morning in late spring. The city outside was already awake, engines humming, voices blending into the rhythm of another workday. Ethan sat in his office early, long before his team arrived. He wasn't checking numbers or emails. He was just thinking. He had built his company back from the edge. His team was stronger, his faith unshakable. But something inside whispered that it was time to dream again, bigger this time. He opened his old notebook, the same one he used years ago when the company was nothing but an idea. The pages were filled with scribbles, sketches, and phrases like, create something that makes people feel alive, build a brand that inspires growth. Reading them, he smiled. Those dreams had become real. But now, a new question formed. What's next? That question, simple as it sounded, would change everything. Because in that moment, Ethan realized that success isn't a finish line. It's a foundation. Imagination, he thought, was not for beginners only, it was for builders who never stopped creating. Part 2, The Forgotten Power. Later that week, Ethan met his mentor, Mr. Harlow, at a small cafe downtown. They spoke of business, life, and growth. Until Ethan confessed, sometimes I feel like I've hit a ceiling. Like I've done everything I know how to do. Mr. Harlow smiled knowingly. You haven't hit a ceiling, Ethan. You've just stopped imagining. Ethan frowned. Imagination? That sounds like something for artists or children. Exactly, said Harlow. And that's why adults stop growing. They stop dreaming like children. They trade imagination for logic, and in doing so, they build cages for themselves. He leaned forward, his voice low and certain. Your next level of success won't come from what you already know. It'll come from what you can imagine. That night, those words echoed in Ethan's mind. He realized that imagination wasn't fantasy. It was blueprint-making. It was the creative engine of every success story. Part 3. The Workshop of the Mind. The next morning, Ethan began a new ritual. Before touching his phone or laptop, he closed his eyes and built his vision in vivid detail. He imagined walking through a larger office, filled with light, energy, and purpose. He pictured his team expanding across the country, helping people live fuller, richer lives. He saw his brand becoming a symbol of growth and excellence. He didn't just think it, he felt it. The pride, the joy, the gratitude, all of it. He felt as though he was already living in that future, and something strange began to happen. Each time he visualized that vision, his mind filled with new ideas, products, partnerships, ways to serve people better. Problems that once seemed complex now had simple solutions. He understood then what Napoleon Hill meant when he said, "Whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve." Imagination wasn't just daydreaming, it was aligning the invisible world with the visible one. Part 4. Turning dreams into design. Ethan began spending time each Friday morning alone with his whiteboard. At the top, he wrote, "Vision, Plan, Action." He treated imagination like strategy, a practical tool, not a luxury. For every idea that came to mind, he asked 3 questions. 1. What would this look like in reality? 2. Who would it help? 3. What small step can I take today? By answering those questions, the fog of possibility turned into the map of a plan. Soon, Ethan's company launched a new product line, one he had first pictured during those quiet morning sessions. His team was amazed at how smoothly everything came together. But Ethan knew why. He had already built it. In his mind, he smiled and whispered to himself, "The world is just catching up to my imagination." Part 5. The Imagination Divide. One evening, at a business event, a young entrepreneur approached Ethan. He looked tired, frustrated, and said, "Mr. Cole, how do you keep coming up with new ideas? I feel stuck. Everything's already been done." Ethan studied the young man for a moment and then said, "Everything has been done, except the way you can do it." The young man blinked, unsure. Ethan continued, "Most people look at the world as it is. But leaders, creators, they look at the world as it could be. They don't just see what's missing, they see what's possible." He leaned closer. Imagination separates the ordinary from the extraordinary. It's the starting point of every empire. The young man nodded slowly, the spark of understanding lighting in his eyes. And Ethan realized that passing this lesson forward was part of his purpose, to awaken imagination in others, just as Mr. Harlow had done for him. Part 6. The Master Builder. Within months passed, and Ethan's new vision became reality. His company expanded into new markets. His team grew stronger than ever. But what mattered most wasn't the numbers or success. It was that Ethan had learned how to create deliberately. He had become what Napoleon Hill called a master builder of the mind. He knew that everything begins twice, first in thought, then in reality. And he guarded his imagination like a sacred flame. Each night before sleeping, he imagined tomorrow as he wanted it to be, clear, purposeful, abundant. And each morning, he woke up with energy, ready to live what he had already seen in his mind. One evening, standing by the window of his high-rise office, Ethan watched the city lights below. They shimmered like possibilities, infinite, waiting to be shaped. He whispered softly, "Imagination built this, and it will build everything that comes next." He finally understood that imagination wasn't just a gift, it was a responsibility. The mind, he realized, is the greatest architect in the universe. What you feed it, it creates. What you fear, it magnifies. What you believe, it builds. That night, Ethan closed his journal and wrote one final line before bed. "The future is never found, it is designed." And with that truth, he drifted to sleep, his mind alive, his vision clear, and his faith unshakable. Because the man who learns to imagine deliberately becomes the master of his destiny. And that is the beginning of every great fortune. To be continued. Backhand index pointing right in Part 6. The Law of Action. Ethan discovers the missing ingredient that turns imagination into tangible success, and learns that ideas mean nothing until they move. Would you like me to continue with Part 6, final part, 1000 words? Next, same Napoleon Hill story style, strong conclusion, and call to action for the audience. Subscribe, share, comment. Gemstone: The Invisible Fortune, Part 6. The Law of Action. Hook: ideas are worthless until you act on them. Dreams are silent until you give them motion. Napoleon Hill said. Action is the real measure of intelligence. Because no amount of wishing, hoping, or planning can replace one courageous step forward. Ethan Cole had mastered faith, imagination, and vision. Now, he was about to face the final test, the moment when belief must become movement, and thought must become creation. Part 1. The stillness before the leap. The sun was just rising beyond the glass towers of the city. Ethan stood at his office window, looking down at the streets where people hurried to work, chasing time, chasing life, chasing dreams. He thought of how far he had come, from a desperate young man surrounded by failure, to a builder of ideas, a leader of people, and a student of life's laws. But something was stirring again, the call of the next mountain. He had envisioned a bold expansion, an academy to teach young entrepreneurs the same principles that had rebuilt his life. The idea filled his mind with excitement and fear. It would require resources, partnerships, and courage beyond what he had yet used. That morning, he wrote in his notebook, "Imagination gives birth to ideas. Faith gives them life. Action gives them power." And with that line, he made his decision. He would no longer wait for the perfect moment. He would create it. Part 2. The Trap of Hesitation. The first week, Ethan shared his vision with a few close advisors. Some smiled politely. Others doubted. "It's risky," one said. "The market isn't ready," warned another. "Maybe next year," suggested a third. Ethan listened, then went home in silence. That night, he remembered something his mentor, Mr. Harlow, had once told him. "The world will always give you 1,000 reasons not to act, but one reason, one purpose, is enough to move mountains." He looked around his study. The books, the awards, the framed vision board. Every success in his life had come from moments when he refused to wait for permission. He realized then that hesitation was the quiet killer of destiny. So he picked up his phone, called his project manager, and said firmly, "We start tomorrow." Part 3. The Power of Definite Action. Within weeks, Ethan's office turned into a storm of motion, designs, plans, and proposals everywhere. His team worked late, filled with the contagious energy of creation. But there were obstacles too. Financial roadblocks, delays, critics who questioned the vision. Every time doubt appeared, Ethan repeated his mantra. Action is stronger than fear. He didn't wait for confidence. He built it through motion. Each task completed, each small success achieved, multiplied his courage. And when things went wrong, as they always do, he didn't curse fate. He reminded himself. Failure is feedback, not defeat. The more he acted, the clearer his path became. And with every step, life itself seemed to reward his faith with opportunity. Part 4. The Law of Motion. One afternoon, Ethan visited a construction site where the academy's building was being raised. The air smelled of steel and sawdust, the scent of dreams taking form. As he watched the workers hammer beams into place, he felt something profound. These men weren't just building walls. They were materializing an idea that once lived only in his imagination. In that moment, he understood what Napoleon Hill meant by the law of motion. When faith is joined with action, unseen forces align to support your purpose. It wasn't luck. It was law. A universal rhythm between thought, belief, and execution. He realized that every creator, from Edison to Ford, from Carnegie to Hill, had lived by the same rhythm. They didn't wait for conditions to be right. They acted, and conditions adjusted around them. Part 5. The Breakthrough. Months passed. The academy finally opened its doors, bright, modern, alive with energy. Students came from everywhere, eager to learn how to think and act for success. During the opening ceremony, Ethan stood before them, heart full of gratitude. He began. There was a time when I thought success was about luck, until I learned that success is a process. He paused, looking into the eyes of the young dreamers before him. Everything you see here, he said, pointing around the hall, was once invisible. It existed only in my mind, but imagination alone isn't enough. You must act on your vision, even when you're afraid, even when you're uncertain. He raised his voice, his words pulsing with conviction. The world belongs to those who move. Not to the thinkers, not to the dreamers, but to the doers who transform thought into action. The crowd erupted in applause, and Ethan felt tears rise behind his eyes. For he knew this truth: the invisible fortune was never money, it was the discovery of his own power to act. Part 6. The final lesson. That evening, Ethan sat alone in his office, watching the sunset melt into the city skyline. His mentor's words came back to him like a whisper from the past. The law of action is the bridge between the world of thought and the world of things. He now understood it fully. Faith, imagination, desire, they were the blueprint. But action was the hammer that built the structure. He took out his notebook one last time and wrote, "Dream it, believe it, do it, then repeat." He smiled, feeling the quiet joy of fulfillment. He had found his invisible fortune, not in wealth, but in mastery of himself. As the room darkened, Ethan whispered his final lesson to the universe. Act now. Begin where you are. Use what you have. The moment you move, life moves with you. And as if to echo his words, the city lights flickered on, 1,000 reminders that even in darkness, there is motion, there is progress, there is life. Because in the end, it is not the dreamers who change the world, it is those who act. High voltage moral of the story: the greatest secret of success lies in this simple formula: thought plus faith plus action equals creation. No dream is too big, no start too small. You don't need the perfect plan, you only need the courage to begin. As Napoleon Hill wrote, "Don't wait. The time will never be just right." So take your first step today, and your invisible fortune will start to take form. Direct hit call to action. If this story inspired you to believe in your dreams and take bold action, backhand index pointing right like this video to keep the message alive. Speech alone. Comment below with your biggest lesson or your next goal. Bell subscribe to join our growing community of dreamers and doers. I'll box straight share this story with someone who needs a spark of faith today. Because when we share inspiration, we multiply possibility. And your story might be the one that awakens another person's destiny.